Nigeria's Federal Ministry of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy this week launched an artificial intelligence fund with 100 million naira in collaboration with Google Africa to support Nigerian startups leveraging AI to build innovative solutions. This was announced at the Pan-African AI Conference in Lagos, co-hosted by the U.S. State Department. We sat down with Joy Basu, who is the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. Joy Basu, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, thank you so much for speaking to Arise News, and it is good to be speaking with you at the Global Inclusivity Artificial Intelligence Conference here in Lagos, Nigeria. What is the connection between inclusivity and artificial intelligence?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be speaking with you and to have this opportunity with Arise and with your audience. There's a really strong link between inclusivity and AI. Artificial intelligence will be the future that drives so much of our economy. It will affect every sector: healthcare, agriculture, education. And we want to make sure that the incredible talent and population here is included in those changes, and that AI can benefit from those broad experiences, and that AI is used actually to bridge the gaps and the divides, not to accelerate them. There is a concern that if we aren't thoughtful about the development of AI, it will create more divisions by excluding people whose data is not already factored into artificial intelligence. So we want to be thoughtful up front about making sure it is empowering, not disempowering.
All right. Now, speaking of empowerment, the Digital Economy Ministry has set up a fund. It's about 100 million naira fund in collaboration with Google Africa. It's going to be managed by the National Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics. Which is a great thing, is for SMEs in Nigeria who are trying to use AI to solve problems. However, if you convert 100 million naira at our current exchange rates, it comes out to $62,000. And look, we're not entitled here, or Google is a multi-billion-dollar company. It doesn't mean that they have to splash billions. But what do you make of the amount of funds that are being made to put forward to assist?
Yeah, I'm
SMEs?
Excited about the fund for two reasons. One, I think it's a starting place. And two, as a former investor, I actually find that sometimes having a smaller sized fund makes it accessible for smaller companies, and then you can manage that money. And so hopefully lots of SMEs will apply for the amount they need to try to be experimental, to try to be innovative. And if this fund is a success, I hope it creates an opportunity for other companies and other funds to grow that. But I think this is a great place to start. It's a great place to do some innovation experimentation and hopefully make it accessible to lots of small companies that might be otherwise too small for bigger funds.
Right.
So I'm excited to see what comes out of it and some of the fun ideas that Nigerian SMEs develop.
Fair enough, fair enough. I want to ask you about whether or not we can, on the African continent, I guess you walk and chew gum at the same time. We were in Abuja, that's Arise News, for the ministry, the Digital Economy Ministry's AI conference. And while I was live on air broadcasting, the power went out. That is how you get development, and that's the essence of the... Okay, so you can see that power is one of the issues we have to be discussing. It went viral, and there was a whole lot of talk about, okay, you're doing AI, but you don't have electricity. According to the International Energy Agency, about 43% of Africans that's about what, 600 million people or so, don't have access to electricity. So how do you marry those two?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and it's one that needs to keep being asked, because we can't solve for AI without also solving for these other challenges. We're going to, the digital will be very much dictated by the physical world. We still need to solve these energy problems if we're going to be able to make the most out of the opportunity of AI. However, the world, Africa, can't wait for the first problems to be solved before also tackling these new opportunities of the future. The economic development of this country, of this continent, won't necessarily be linear. As you said, we have to be able to walk and chew gum. So the same week that I am here for the AI conference, we're hosting a strategic energy dialogue between the United States and Nigeria in Washington to try to understand, how do we help solve these energy challenges? How do we think about the transition? How do we bring on new sources of energy? How do we make sure that these energy needs are being met faster in Nigeria, both for people's basic needs, but also to meet companies' needs in Nigeria? And yet we can't wait for all of those problems to be solved. Nigeria is I think, a country that really demonstrates that the future is here now, and we also have other development challenges that we need to solve simultaneously. It is a place where you see so many different sectors and what can feel otherwise like different points of time coming together. And that's one of the beautiful things about being here in Nigeria, but it's also something we need to be really realistic about, that we need to both solve these challenges that can feel very futuristic, but also make sure we're not taking our eye off the ball on the basic development needs of the population.
All right. Another challenge, I guess, opportunity that we face on the continent. We got a lot of skilled youth, but then there's been a challenge with keeping them. They're emigrating to the United States, North America, Asia, Europe, and so on and so forth. So, as AI develops, how do you hold on to those skilled youth and keep them from being poached?
Yeah. In my opinion, Africa's greatest asset is its incredible, young, talented population. The world needs this brain power. AI needs this brain power. We need their creativity, their innovation, their way of seeing the world. And whenever I'm here on the continent, I am so hopeful about the future, not only of Africa, but of the world. That being said, I think this challenge of brain drain is very real in West Africa. Across industries, but particularly for industries like healthcare, I know it's quite acute. I think I read a statistic that in the next 15 years, 1 in 3 workers in the world will be African. And many of them will be here on the continent. They'll also be, around the world. We as the United States, we as the Nigerian government, I think the world has an interest in making sure that that population is educated, that that population is equipped, both to handle the challenges they're facing now and of tomorrow. So, I think this conversation of, will they be poached, will they not be poached? I think our key question is how do we make sure that they both have the opportunities here to make the most of their talent, but also that they are well equipped to take their talents wherever they go, because the world needs that young African talent, and I'm excited about investing in that. The United States makes a lot of investments in the people here, and that's what I'm most proud of, whether that's our YALI fellowships, where we do programs to take young African youth leaders to the US for 6 weeks for training, or whether it's our other exchange programs or our investments in research and development and education here. I think the United States and Africa, the United States and Nigeria have such a strong interest in the future together, and that will kind of rest with young Africans, including young Nigerians.
It's a very it's a bright future. There's a whole lot of opportunity there. We've talked a lot about opportunity and I guess the good side of AI and what it can bring. I do want to ask you about the risks, and particularly deep fakes. What's your take on the risks? How do we mitigate those risks? How do you see that panning out as AI scales and develops?
Those are many of the questions we're asking here, right? There's incredible upsides to AI that we want to make sure that people can seize, but we also need to be preparing ourselves collectively against the downsides. And you're right, some of those risks are really real, particularly in the context, this is a year of elections and we're seeing so many elections, and we've seen some of those risks, as you point out, with deep fakes, with other crimes that happen through cyber. I think we need to first ensure that our population is educated about what those risks are, that they are taught to think critically, that companies are creating the right norms amongst themselves, and that those are transparent, and that from a governance perspective, we're being very clear about where the lines are as to what becomes illegal, and how we work together with the private sector. This is something that will be co-created by Africans, by Americans, by the private sector, by businesses, but we really need to be having that conversation transparently now before AI gets beyond a point of being able to be regulated or even very well understood by the population. That's why I'm so glad we hosted this conversation here, because we're talking about both the upsides and the downsides, and we won't be prepared for it unless we have very honest conversations about what the risks are and how we together create shared norms about what we will and will not accept from the development and deployment of AI. One of our key goals here is to make sure that that's done responsibly and that's done safely in a trustworthy fashion to really kind of create the best version of itself that really empowers humanity and helps us to do well with it, opposed to some of the other downsides. But those are the important questions we're having here.
Yeah, I'm glad. So that's pretty much to round off my final question for you. When you take a look at holistically what you've hosted here, and we're very thankful that the U.S. government is doing this, what do you want to be the takeaway from the Global Inclusivity and Artificial Intelligence Conference here in Lagos, Nigeria?
I'd give you 3 takeaways. 1, that the world needs African voices, African talent, African development as a part of the conversation. we need to make sure that the data that the world uses is representative of the data coming from Africa. And so we need to make sure that African experiences are reflected. And so I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. And 2 days is not enough. We need to keep having these conversations. Second, it's that the upsides of AI are tremendous, but we need to be practical about applying those to people's real needs. We have so many challenges that we're trying to solve together, but we need to think about how can this actually better people's lives, and how do we take it from these intellectual conversations to people's farms, to the doctor's office, things that can actually help us. We talked about brain drain. How do we actually help AI have one physician solve her problems for her patients much more effectively? And 3, I would say we need to be talking about the risks, and we need to have an honest conversation at a governance level. And that's starting to happen here. It's happening at the UN in a couple weeks. But we need to create shared norms that really take a rights-respecting approach. And I'm really glad that we're having those conversations here. They need to continue to be had. And I leave here inspired and energized by us asking the right questions, and we're only going to find the right answers by being in conversation, which honestly is the heart of diplomacy. So it feels very exciting and very worthwhile to have had this conference.
Hey, we look forward to a whole lot more. Joy Basu, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, thank you so much for talking to Arise News. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.